There are probably few people who, were the question put to them directly, would not say that they consider bread one of the most, if not the most important article of diet. And yet, there is almost a total and universal carelessness about the character of bread. Thousands in civic life will, for years and perhaps as long as they live, eat the most miserable trash that can be imagined in the form of bread. And never once will they seem to think that they could possibly have anything better, nor that it is an evil to eat such vile stuff as they do. The words of one DIY bread enthusiast, Sylvester Graham. A man who found the new processed bread products of the 1800s so abhorrently disgusting that he would dedicate his entire life to crusading against the consumption of processed bread. And he wasn't even in it for the dough. He wanted to create a lifestyle that was centered around his ideals and bring enlightenment to those who were simply clueless. At the peak of his career, Graham would start a super sweet fan club, incite a few riots, and ultimately alienate entire cities of bakers. Now, as you sit there, you may be thinking to yourself, well, Nick, what could possibly be so controversial about bread? And to answer that question, I've prepared a super fun history lesson for you guys. So, to understand Sylvester Graham, we have to start at the beginning. Sylvester Graham was born in 1794 in Suffield, Connecticut. His father was a Presbyterian minister who died very early on in Sylvester's life. He left behind a whole lot for Sylvester's mother, a whopping 17 children. Now, you would think that a woman who was forced to support 17 children on her own would be some sort of historical icon. Am I right, ladies? But alas, not even her name is known. The only thing that we know about Sylvester's mother is that she went insane a few years after the death of Sylvester's father. Now, scientists speculate that it was because she was raising 17 children. Now, despite the fact that both of Sylvester's parents peaced out when Sylvester was just a wee little biscuit, they would be greatly influential figures in Sylvester's life. Sylvester would follow in the footsteps of his father and become a Presbyterian minister for a short time, where he would learn excellent public speaking skills. And his mother, well, let's just say Sylvester spent the majority of his life trying to understand insanity. However, the insanity that Sylvester would study was not of the Norman Bates, Psycho, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, Amanda Bynes insanity that we were familiar with. No. The Sylvester Graham brand of insanity was something more of a consequence, shall we say, or a lifestyle that was chock full of what Sylvester liked to call self-pollution. You know, Jack and the old beanstalk, choking the chicken, Komodo the dragon. It was masturbation. I didn't write history, that's just how it was. In Sylvester's lecture to young men on chastity, intended also for the serious consideration of parents and guardians, no, really, that is the full title, Sylvester urges against this self-pollution, as it will leave participants with, and I quote, with a body full of disease, and with a mind in ruins, the loathsome habit tyrannizing over him, and with the inexorable imperiousness of a fiend of darkness. Basically, it was a self-imposed STD. Now, Sylvester was a man of strong faith. That much is obvious. But he was also a man of science. He kept his face in the books and followed a scientific trail of breadcrumbs that led him to the gingerbread cottage of sin. And what did he discover was inside? None other than the wicked witch herself. Bread. Yes, bread. What a thunk. The Industrial Revolution had snatched away the wholesome loaves of bread that we all knew and loved right out of the frail old fingers of America's collective grandmama and replaced it with bleached white flour and chemical additive loaves of indecency. Sylvester believed that the ingestion of these Satan snacks was causing young men to fall into insanity and thus self-pollute and thus spiral downward into a life of moral depravity. Things in America had gotten pretty crummy. And Sylvester knew that if he loafed around any longer, humanity as he knew it would be toast. And so he decided that it was time to rise to the occasion with jokes, and thus create a solution to the problem that he had also created. And so, Sylvester Graham, national chastity advocate, began to pimp his rye in an effort to create a foodstuff that was both pure and kind. Something that showed how bread was meant to be. Something totally dry and undelicious in every single way. Something that made you stop mid-chew and think, wow, I am so not turned on right now. After a few trials and reformulations, he had it. A thin, crispy brown wafer. Man's cure-all. This was what the world had been waiting for. No, this was what no one had been waiting for. And Sylvester had to get the word out. And what better way to get the word out than a national tour? Graham wooed audiences with his ministry-gained charm, and pretty soon, his audiences decided that they needed to step it up a notch, and went on to create what could very possibly be history's first fandom. They called themselves the Grahamites, and they were Sylvester's biggest fans. They followed him across the country at every lecture, never missing an episode. They traded super rare Sylvester recipes and even engaged in Sylvester Graham cosplay. Okay, that last one was a lie. Regardless, Sylvester Graham was on a roll. Not only did the Grahamites want to know more about Sylvester's curious creation, they needed to. Graham had succeeded in planting a grain of knowledge. I'm not stopping. A grain of knowledge all across the country. A grain that didn't sit well with some bakers who had decided to take on those new industrialized techniques. Sylvester was taking away their business, and that baker society decided that they needed to take matters into their own hands and form an angry mob outside of one of Sylvester's lectures. And at that lecture, Sylvester's Grahamites and that mob went at it neck and neck. Pretty soon, things got hotter than a preheated oven. And the Grahamites, who were worked into a frenzy over chemical-free bread, decided that they were going to give that angry mob a taste of their own medicine by pouring pounds of slaked lime, a food additive that becomes corrosive in large amounts. Why it was there, I have no idea. Anyway, they pushed that slaked lime right onto the mob, who quickly dispersed as Graham escaped out the back door of the lecture hall. Graham escaped unharmed, but his anti-processed bread campaign came to an untimely end when Sylvester died just a few years later at the ripe old age of 57. Now, to conclude today's history lesson, Graham, his health crusade didn't save him. His theology was suspect, his science was shoddy, and his original intent has gone stale. But despite what you may think, he lives on. And you, and some more of you, all tasted his legacy, the graham cracker. Preschoolers all the world over salute you, Sylvester. And it just goes to show that everything around us has a story. Some stories are just waiting at the very back of the pantry for their chance to be